Psychopathology of everyday life. It's a very interesting paper by Freud where he applies insights of psychoanalysis that he has found by analyzing patients to the general population and discover how even in everyday normal life psychopathology makes its appearance in a subtle way, in a sublimated way, in an elusive way, in a surreptitious way. However, the presence of psychopathology is inescapable if we focus on analyzing everyday life. That even in everyday life of a healthy person, psychopathology surreptitiously makes its presence felt. Which means the sick and the healthy person are both on a continuum and they are not two poles of a binary with a gulf in between. Psychopathology of everyday life is very interesting where we apply psychoanalysis to our everyday life and see how psychopathology works in our normal everyday. Freud surveys everyday life and brings out which areas of everyday life we see psychopathology, and therefore we can apply psychoanalysis to understand what parts of our everyday life. First instance of psychopathology in everyday life, Freud says in the paper, is forgetting. So he talks about different types of forgetting. Forgetting because something is not interesting, forgetting because something is not useful, forgetting because something occurred a very long time ago, and contrast this with forgetting which does not fall into these three categories. Forgetting what one ought to remember, forgetting what one ought not to forget in normal course, and yet one forgets. And Freud says when that happens, such forgetting has in the unconscious mind related to its forgetting a psychopathology. So the manager asks the assistant manager to bring something from a shop and the person forgets. When the person is not in the habit of forgetting on the regular course, in a regular course. This kind of forgetting, Freud says, has unconscious motivations behind it. It may be defiance, it may be anger, it may be some fantasy, it may be transference, it may be displacement, but there is something unconscious behind such forgetting. This is one of the very important aspects, instances of psychopathology working in our everyday life. Second instance, second area of psychopathology in everyday life is the area of slips. There can be a slip of tongue where you say something you never intended to say. We will see a video where people have said in public something they ought not to say, it just slipped out. and then the person says, I never wanted to say this, or I didn't mean the way it came out. Then you have slips of writing. You are writing something and in between you commit a mistake and write something which is out of context or wrong. And then speaking. Not speaking, it should be listening. Slips of tongue or slips of speaking, this is a mistake. I should have written down listening. You listen something which is not said by the person. So there are slips of speaking, the slips of tongue, slips of writing, and the slips of listening. This part should be removed. Speaking part should be substituted by listening. So these slips, Freud says, have a psychopathological core in the unconscious mind associated to this event. So the slip of tongue, the slip of writing, the slip of listening just does not happen disjointed as a disjointed autonomous independent event. It happens because it is associated to something psychopathological in the unconscious mind. There are many videos on YouTube. Just Google on YouTube saying Freudian slips. And these slips are called Freudian slips. Take an example. A husband says to his wife, your hair are going gray. Why don't you dye? So one meaning of the statement is you dye the hair, and the second meaning of the statement is you dye. Take second example. There was a statement printed in a magazine about strange habits of great people. And it said Einstein had a strange habit of sleeping 10 to 12 hours every day. And one person who read this, he said, he was a man, he said, the only thing I share with Einstein is sleep. One way to understand this is that the only commonality between me and him is we both take long periods of sleep. But second can be unconscious homosexual desire. So these are slips. There are many videos on YouTube. Just type on YouTube, search on YouTube, Freudian slips, and you will see many fascinating and entertaining videos of how in real life people have made Freudian slips, and we can see the psychopathology in their unconscious mind working out through those slips. In psychotherapy, we give a lot of focus on these slips because slips are one of very resourceful ways in which the unconscious leaks out. The unconscious leaks out in hypnosis, in free association, in slips, in art. And therefore slips, analysis of slips is a very powerful tool to know what is in the unconscious. One more area where the psychopathology of everyday life we have all seen. Then the paper talks about bungled actions. We have to do X and we end up doing Y, or we cannot do X properly. And we can, if we analyze the bungled actions, we can see psychopathology. More often than not, it is defiance or envy. Superstitions. Behind superstitions can be psychopathology in the unconscious mind, and each culture would have its own set of superstitions. Errors we make. We are doing some calculation and we do an error, or any other error we make. And if we analyze errors, they will fall in two categories: normal errors and errors with psychopathology behind them. Humor is also an interesting area where much of humor, a part of humor is innocent and a part of humor has psychopathology behind it. And most common is humor is often sublimation of aggression and envy. Another important area that Freud talks about is routine. How parts of our routine or our schedule of every day can be informed or based upon psychopathology in the unconscious mind. So there can be a natural way of living. For example, a person with high anxiety and obsessive traits, when he cuts vegetables for everyday consumption, he cuts in a peculiar way and he cuts too thin or too large, but there is a pattern to his cutting. And more often than not, they cut too thin. And there you see, in the act of cutting vegetables for everyday consumption, we can see the psychopathology at work in everyday life. Second instance is, after the death of someone, those who are alive, they take on some characteristic or some action of the one who is dead. And this has psychopathology in the unconscious mind. So the paper on psychopathology of everyday life is a very entertaining, amusing, very interesting paper among the lighter papers of Freud. And he opens up our eyes to see around us. Almost it's an exercise in learning to see around us psychopathology at work in everyday life. With Freudian concepts, we are able to see psychopathology in everyday life all around us. Without the concepts, you cannot see what you don't know. That is the situation we find ourselves in. So this is a very entertaining paper. Do go through it. Let me know what comes out, if any questions are there. Write to me in details, line to line. I shall discuss and give commentary upon in a separate course, reading psychoanalysis. Thank you.